you all going out there? I'll get my plugs in like I always do. Hello, how's everyone tonight? Another Melbourne Musos Feast Chook Live. And my name is Quinlan of Melbourne Musos of Channel 31 and all that. I'll talk about that in a minute. And tonight, it's jazz. Reason being is because we need to celebrate the life of Jimmy Cobb, who is most likely the most listened to drummer of jazz on the planet. The reason why is because he was the drummer for Miles Davis's Kind of Blue album, which I have here. This is my vinyl, all the rest is on CD, but I think you get the picture. That is the most famous album in jazz history, okay? Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. It changed everything. And basically, Jimmy Cobb, R.I.P. this week, went off to the great gig in the sky. He was the last surviving member of the group that put this jazz classic out. And essentially, he passed away just the other day. This year, I have been making sardonic jokes about it. Like last week, I said, the Dead Drummer Bar and Grill proudly presents, because we're starting to get out of lockdown and all that sort of stuff. And then what should happen? Jimmy Cobb goes to the great gig in the sky. He had a wonderful life. He's in his 90s, and I'm going to go through it all in a minute. But what I'm going to do tonight is get a bit sophisticated, because he was a very debonair gent. Ooh, there you go. So I'm going to start reading about Jimmy Cobb. I hope you're all enjoying yourself this week. It's the first week back for some of the kids at school. I'm gearing up to go back to teaching some in the room and all that. I'm buying a pallet of hand sanitizer like everybody else is and all this sort of stuff. Some of the kids want to stay online. And some of the practicing, some of the improvements have gone like that for some, because it's distilled and all that's fantastic. Anyway, that's not what I'm on about tonight, am I? Jimmy Cobb, God bless him. God, he would have to be the most listened to drummer of jazz, I would think, because every college band has done Kind of Blue to death. Okay, so what, and all that. It's the most butchered song. When you listen to it, it's beautiful, like the original Girl from Ipanema. But you get 60 years of restaurant bands doing Girl from Ipanema. Oh, but, me included. There you go. Anyway, here we are, Jimmy Cobb. Wilbur James Cobb, January the 20th, 1929. Only a couple of months older than my mum. And he passed away on the 24th of May, 2020. What have we got there? 5 days ago. Was an American jazz drummer. He was part of Miles Davis's first great sextet. At the time of his death, he had been the band's last surviving member for nearly 30 years. He was awarded an NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship in 2009. There we go. Early life. Cobb was born in Washington, D.C. on January the 20th, 1929. I just said that. Before he began his music career, he listened to jazz albums and stayed awake into the late hours of the night in order to listen to Symphony Sid performing in New York City. Cobb started his touring career in 1950 with the saxophonist Earl Bostic. He subsequently performed with vocalist Dinah Washington, pianist Wynton Kelly, saxophonist Cannonball Adderley, bassist Keita Betts, Frank West, Leo Park, and Charlie Rouse. His website also recounts his gigs with Billie Holiday, Pearl Bailey, and Dizzy Gillespie that took place before 1957. Okay, that's the lead-up. Cobb joined Miles Davis in 1957 and as part of the latter's first great sextet. For those of you who don't know, I'm going off script. Miles Davis, the course of jazz changed with what Miles Davis did for like his, for 4 decades, that kind of thing. And what it was is during the 1950s, he had the first great sextet, 6-piece, John Coltrane in there. Oh boy, Philly Joe Jones on drums, all that. And then Jimmy Cobb, who went on to do the Kind of Blue album, and all that sort of stuff. The second great sextet started in the early 60s, and that is with Herbie Hancock and Tony Williams on drums, Wayne Shorter on saxophone. The vinyl's in the other room, right next to these ones. But the thing about it is that whatever Miles Davis did for so long, that's where jazz went almost, that kind of thing. So, and Jimmy Cobb is part of it. These are the albums he was on. The aforementioned Kind of Blue. Okay. The most successful jazz album in history. Started off modal playing. Very big. Write this down. George Russell's concept of Lydian chromatic harmony. Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? Sort of thing. I had a lend of that book once, and I just read the bejesus. Anyway, that's Miles Davis. It started modal playing, a whole different way of approaching solos, really. So that's a Kind of Blue album. He did Saturday Night, Miles Davis in person at the Black Hawk, San Francisco, Volume 1 and 2. I've got them around the wrong way. I've got 2 and 1 here. Chris, get your act together, mate. Volume 1 and Volume 2. There it is there. Now, I've had this up on the show before. Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain, arranged and conducted by Gil Evans. And Jimmy Cobb was the perfect understated drummer for this album. That's a gorgeous album. You just want to go out and listen to that. That's amazing, amazing album. And this classic that I hunted down on a special order import, I paid through the teeth for it and I didn't care. Miles Davis, Porgy and Bess. Summertime and the living is easy. I love you, Porgy. All that sort of stuff. Miles Davis. There you go. Now, look at these albums that Jimmy Cobb was on. That's enough right there, isn't it? Okay, that's just with Miles Davis. I've got his discography. I'll be here until 8 o'clock reading all the albums off that, right? And all that. So I'll keep on going for just a little bit here. What happens is Cobb joined Miles Davis in 1957 as part of the latter's first great sextet after Adderley recommended him to Davis. Cobb's best-known recorded work is on Davis's Kind of Blue, 1959. Cobb was the last surviving player from the Sessions, a distinction he held for just under the last 3 decades. And he played on the Davis albums, which I've just mentioned. There you go. His subtle, check this out. His subtle and understated demeanor drew the admiration of many, including Davis. However, this also meant that he did not get the same level of recognition that his fellow drummers would. Cobb had the propensity to eschew publicity and did not record his first set as bandleader until 1983 with the release of So Nobody Else Can Hear. Now, let me talk about this understated, debonair gentleman's personality. When you're listening to him, he's classy. He's class, but he pushes. I'm going to do brushes in a second, Chris, note to self. What happens is that when he's playing, he's got this clipped feel about it. Now, let me just go through some basics of jazz to get started and all that sort of stuff. We've got a jazz feel, but a lot of people say it's based on triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. You see, you get that kind of thing. Jimmy Cobb had this kind of clipped feel. So it's almost like the rate is more like 16th notes, semiquavers. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. Like that. The Sydney drummer that I used to like listening to in the late 70s and the early 80s, which I mentioned about 2 months ago, Alan Turnbull, that I always thought played a bit like that. So when it was a little bit more up-tempo, sometimes you'd hear Jimmy Cobb just playing straight straight crotchets. And then it's like a clip. Look, a clip. And one of his things that you hear on Kind of Blue, Sketches of Spain, Porgy and Bess, I've been listening to them all day, essentially is the rim click on 4. A 1, 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. That's Jimmy Cobb. So what you've got is this beautiful pronounced rim click in Kind of Blue. It's like click like that. It's like a spike, you know. Hello, Spike, if you're watching. You got a spike in it there, sort of thing. Pow, like that little quick one. And combine that with a 16th note kind of clipped feel. And when you're watching him, he's straight, well presented, you know, terrific, debonair gentleman. By all accounts, an absolute gent. Very nice man, apparently, all that stuff. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is take one brush and one stick and do the same thing, sort of in shot, sort of out of shot, but as you know, later on tonight I'll have the 4 cameras up for you and all that. But one of the famous things is Miles Davis's sextet, that very, very famous black and white thing of him doing, sections of the Kind of Blue album, you know, and it's very, very cool, you know, brilliant stuff. American TV, black and white, late 50s, you know, that kind of thing. And the very first person, you know, the camera cranes down to Jimmy Cobb, right? And what he's got is a brush on the right hand and the aforementioned beautiful rim click with the left hand. Now what I've got here over on the right, I've changed my symbols around because part of tonight's show is I want to show you some of the stuff that we do when we get a jazz gig, if we can. There you go. But what happens is that in that clip, he was playing the ride cymbal with the brush and the left hand with the stick. So. Put in 1, 2 many. Come on, Chris, be debonair. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. You see. And that's what he was doing there. It's beautiful, gorgeous stuff. Now, I'm going to come back to brushes in a bit, but what I'm going to do now, pick it up a bit. Now, one of the things that you'll always notice with Jimmy Cobb, he's the jazz drummer's drummer in the sense that I've got it set up differently here, but he used different ride cymbals for different soloists and stuff. Now we all do that, but I want to make a point of a couple of things. His cymbal sounds were like gorgeous, and the way that he played them, it's got so much to do with the way that you hit a cymbal, okay, the way that you play it and all that. My favourite cymbal sounds for decades was Tony Williams's cymbals, okay, and I didn't go out and just get that brand or anything like that. I just loved the sound. They just sound like rain on the rooftops. As soon as I heard Tony Williams and on the Miles Smiles album or Sorcerer album, you know, that kind of thing, I just go, there it is. And to a certain extent, I hear the same thing on Kind of Blue. But more so, I just love, out of them, I love Sketches of Spain. I just love that album so much. I love the arrangements of Gil Evans and all that. But what it would be is, like, he would move cymbals depending. So what I've got is 3 rides here for you on the right. Now don't worry, I'm doing this live straight to that one camera there. But I've got this camera, that camera, and the, you know, odd sock cam down below, because I've got something to show you down there in a bit too. Here's my standard Benny Greb sand ride, okay? Trying to play a bit clipped. That's the main thing. Clipping. Here's a little bit looser. Can you hear the difference? Now, off we go to a saxophone solo. Now, that's a 22-inch sand ride with 3 rivets in it. Whoa. Still clipped. And now, that's a raw bell. Dryer. That's the one I usually take out to gigs, actually. Now, I'm going to stop there. Could you hear the different tones you see? Now, what happens is I've got 3 ride cymbals there. So, there's that one. There's the sand clap. I was in a band a little while ago, and every time the lead guitarist took a solo, it seemed that the way the songs went, I would always use that one. But that's your cymbal, mate. And there, can you see it back right off? I'm doing the same thing. There's that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Clip, clip, clip. Can you see it back off? I'm doing the same thing. I'm not changing anything. So moving between the cymbals like that is the kind of thing that you can move between a raucous saxophone solo and then come back down to the piano solo or even the bass solo or whatever. Reason being, Jimmy Cobb was a master at it. You could hear him move. You could hear him go with the flow, going like that. All right? That's the Jimmy Cobb thing. When you listen to things like Kind of Blue and Sketches of Spain, one of the first things you hear is that tonal kind of just hugging the soloist, you know, that kind of thing. All that. The aforementioned rim click on 4. It was always there, you know, that kind of thing with him. Now over to brushes. Now, one of the things is, you know, I've got a Zappa poster up there. We are what we watch. We are what we eat. If we are a debonair gent and we aspire to people like Jimmy Cobb, what happens is that, you know, your personality, for better or worse, goes into your instrument, however you want to do it. That's the way it's meant to be. But what I find when Jimmy Cobb was playing brushes, he had the same kind of thing. It was very... Now, he played with Sarah Vaughan. And my friend Magda Williams. Hello, Magda, if you're watching. Okay. We've been doing a bit of that lately. Detour Ahead. I had Lush Life out this morning. And what happens is when you're playing with people like, you know, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, oh boy. He actually did early gigs with Billie Holiday sort of thing. And all that stuff. You got to learn to hold the tempo slow. I always admired a drummer by the name of Grady Tate, who played with Sarah Vaughan for, I don't know, 16 years or something. He seemed to bob up on every album. He was a master at slow brushes, you know, that kind of thing. And how are you going to do that? You've got that one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. See what I'm doing there? And what I'm doing I'm basically drawing footy balls, footballs. I'm drawing the footy, mate, the footy. And one, two. And when you don't really want to go like that. You want to try and quantize your beats, sort of thing. So if you're going to go, one, two, three. Whoa, that's hard, try and keeping a steady, beautiful flow like that. Us drummers like to go fast, that kind of thing. Push it, brother, push it, that kind of thing. But Jimmy Cobb, that's what he would sort of do. Now, let me just explain the brush pattern, I suppose. I'm just basically, I've got two that I tend to teach my students, and then everything comes out of that. There's a whole bunch of little fancy tricks. I've got a beautiful Philly Joe Jones brush book put out by Premier Drum Company about 1968 kind of thing. And they were like hen's teeth. And I found a couple of them kind of thing. And all of a sudden I became popular with a couple of guys. Oh, mate, yeah, can I borrow that? Yeah. So I lost one, never to be seen again. Thanks very much, mate. You remember things like that? But being debonair. Anyway, what it is the first one is you draw circles. So you find a point on your drum, like you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. You're finding that point there. And you don't want to, go all snarky. What it is sort of get it nice, smooth flow. Nice and smooth. Okay? And then you do the opposite with this, with the left hand. So that's there. And that was shown to me in the 70s by an American drummer by the name of Ed Soph, who, funnily enough, I mentioned last week, who came to Australia a couple of times as part of the early VCA jazz course business, summer courses and all that. Anyway, I was in one of them and I was a kid, and he taught me that. And then what you do is you get the tar with the left hand. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 1. So I'll put it up here for you. Here, but it's going to be on all the different cameras later on. 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 1. Like that, you see. But then Jimmy Cobb would clip it. 1. You could hear it. You just hear it. Heel toe with the hi-hat. Can you see it down there in boot camp, people? You can't see it. Later on, you'll see it. I've got the camera down there. Boot, so heel, toe, a heel. You see? Pick it up a bit. The hi-hat is a Benny Greb 14-inch. Matches that one there, and the crash and the sand. Right, that's the sand set. There you go. So that's what goes on there. Now, when you're actually doing things like that, one of the things that goes on, especially if you're doing sort of club work and like one night you're doing a jazz gig, next night you're doing a wedding reception, the next night you're doing rock and roll and stuff like that. The beater. There's a thing about 4 on the floor for jazz where what you want to do is a thing called feathering. So it's very light. You see, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And what happens is there's beaters out there, big furry ones for all sorts of things. So you've got to pay, you've got to take that one off and put it on. But now it's the rock and roll part of the evening. You've got to take that out and put on another one. You want to know a trick of the trade? Baby socks. Yeah. Aren't they cute? Oh, you little thing is a beauty, a little baby. Have a look at him. There you go. So you get a set of baby socks, right? And you put them over the beater, right? Like that. Now, you do that. I'll put down 2. Now, I've got my left side. So here's my left kick that obviously I'm not using tonight because we're doing jazz. So here's my left side, right? Okay. Can you hear that? That's normal. Here's the baby socks. See, it takes the whole edge off. So there it is there. Now, as I said, later on, I'll have boot cam all ready to go, and that's all that there. But that's what you've got there. So you'll see it with boot cam later. And that's what you'd hear. Sometimes not. You'd hardly hear it. It's just there. Now, let me tell you about the history of feathering bass drum and all that. You got your big double bass, ba-doom, bing, ding, ding, bam, 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 and all that. But when jazz started, there's no PA systems as per se or whatever. You just had that. So the idea of the bass drum, and you've got to remember that the early bass drums, if you've seen any of the pictures of the old trad bands and stuff, they're 26-inch things. Huge and all that. And what it is so many of those bass drums were marching bass drums, designed to be thump, thump, thump going down the street, sort of thing. Jelly Roll Morton, 1917, is attributed as saying, can't one guy do all of that? First set of jazz automation, play by the rules. Jazz police were arresting you. There you are. Anyway, my name is Detective Ornette Coltrane. That's an old joke, don't worry about it. Anyway, Detective Coltrane, what are you doing with the rest of my wife? Never get a jazz gig again, Chris. You never did, Chris. Anyway, so what goes on? Ka-ching pum. I'm getting off the track. I got to keep on going. So what happens is you've got that kind of feathered bass drum. There's your, like in the big sonic scheme of things, down low, and then, you've got let's say you've got your bass drum, your double bass, then you've got your rhythm section, and then you've got your soloists and singers and everything like that. So what happens is that the bass drum is meant to be supporting the double bass, that kind of thing. So what happens is you're not meant to go, that kind of thing or anything like that. You're meant to be underneath, right? So you can feel it just there. It's not meant to be a John Bonham thing or anything like that. When I take it out, you can feel it. It's not there. Jimmy Cobb. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Here he is. There it is. There you go. So there's a little bit of that there for you. Now, I love playing my brushes. I don't play them enough. I've got to play them more. And what happens is that's that pattern there. I'll quickly show you again. You do that like so. And then when you want your tars, you come in with the left hand. That's a 4-stroke rough there. Rim shot. Lots of little tricks with brushes and all that stuff. But I'll save that for another day. I'm really talking about Jimmy Cobb and his legacy and all that. So there's that there for you. And then the basic principle of brushes is when we're talking about it, is that you have the horizontal, you play like that, and then you have the vertical, and that's what happens, you see. So you mix between the two. So there it is. So what goes on here is that when we're actually talking about things like that, one of the things that I suppose was a bit of an advantage for myself, because brushes are, for me, are becoming a bit of a, I see them as being a bit of a lost art simply because of electronic drum kits and things like that. And one of the benefits or advantages I suppose I had was my old teacher, H. Harold. He, H, mate, how you going, shagging? Say hello to your mum for me. There you go. Yeah. Anyway, but he'd say just practice with brushes. So I just play on telephone books or on anything. Just now, I've forgotten the name of it, but I was coming back from the shops today, doing my research, and Jimmy Cobb with Brad Maldale came up, and there was this, and I go, how's he doing that? So I had to stop, take the phone out of my pocket and look how he was doing it. No, it was just that there. And this was only like a decade ago, so it was in the 80s or whatever then. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's what you do. It's gorgeous. Oh, gorgeous. Understated stuff, that kind of stuff. So when you're actually playing, when you want to practice and you want to sort of get strong with your hands and stuff, play with brushes. These are a set of ProMark TB5s. A little bit on the heavier side. They're not the heaviest, but still, I like them. And there's a bit of something to hold on to. So, there you go. There's a couple of tips there. Baby socks. Feathering the bass drum. 4 on the floor. You've got the, I was sort of mumbling it before, but heel toe for your 2 and 4. With Jimmy Cobb, there was big on the rim click on 4s. I've shown you the classic Miles Davis albums and things. And I'll start to wrap the show up a little bit here. I got to Sarah Vaughan when he was playing with that, and that's what got me into brushes. And he's taught at Stanford University, University of North Carolina, and Berklee College of Music. He played in a tribute band called 4 Generations of Miles, together with Ron Carter on bass and George Coleman on tenor saxophone. George Coleman was the first saxophonist before Wayne Shorter joined in the 60s. Sam Rivers, who I loved playing. I've got a funny story about Sam Rivers. When he was in Melbourne, I was his roadie with Dave Holland, the bass player, sort of thing. Somehow I had a Ford XY wagon, and Martin Jackson said, Chris, we need someone to get them from the airport and all that. I struck up a great friendship, or not, struck up a great conversation with Dave Holland. To this day, one of my favourite double bass players. Gorgeous. Played brilliant with Jack DeJohnette, that kind of thing. All that stuff. But, Sam Rivers. He wasn't in town long. He needed some action real fast. Anyway, I'll save that for a bit later on. That's a funny story. Anyway, Steve Ellington was the drummer. He was a gent. He was a lovely bloke. Young bloke, too. Anyway, there you go. I don't know if he was any relation to the Duke, but that's his thing. Anyway, during his career, Sam Rivers. There was George Coleman, Sam Rivers, and then Wayne Shorter joined. And that was Miles Davis's second great quintet, sextet, quintet, all that stuff. There you go. All right. During his career, Cobb worked with, check these names out with you, Bill Evans, Clark Terry, Stan Getz, John Coltrane, Wes Montgomery, Art Pepper, Wayne Shorter, Benny Golson, Gil Evans, Kenny Dorman, Frank Strozier, Bobby Timmons, Booker Little, Johnny Griffin, Akiko Tursuruga, I hope I said that right, Bertha Hope, Hamiet Blewett. I've got a Hamiet Blewett. He went all free avant-garde, that guy. I've got one of his albums that's just like crazy. Nat Adderley, John Hendricks, Joe Henderson, Fathead Newman, Jerry Allen, Larry Willis, Walter Booker, Red Garland, Richie Cole, Ernie Royal, Jerome Richardson, Jimmy Cleveland, Philly Joe Jones, two drummers together, Sonny Stitt, Nancy Wilson, Ricky Ford, Richard Wyans, John Webber, Peter Bernstein, among many others. Personal life and passing. Cobb was married to Alina Steinberg Cobb until his death. Together they had two daughters, Serena and Jamie, both of whom survived him. He passed away on the 24th of May, 5 days ago, at his home in Manhattan. He was 91. What an innings. What a fantastic innings. And sadly, lung cancer got him. And there it is there, at 91. So there it is. You can have really sad things, tragic things. We all know about that. I'm making jokes about it, how bad this year is so far. But this is sort of a celebration. You can't do it anyway. If you've done all that and you've made it to 91 and you're surrounded by people who love you, you've done okay. You've done all right. You know, that kind of thing. Have a look at the discography. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and half of page 5. That is a legacy to the man. There it is there. Okay. And I've probably got a couple. I just saw one there. I said, I've got that album. I didn't know he was on it. Cedar Walton, Midnight Waltz. I've got that. I've got one of Cedar Walton's. I don't know how. Yeah. I just bought a whole. I'll take that one. I'll try that out one day with my vinyl out the back. There you go. So I'm going to wrap the show up. This is for Jimmy Cobb. And what I've tried to do is show you some of the little bibs and bobs that you can do in jazz. One of the main things is, as I said, Jimmy Cobb is the drummer for the most famous jazz album in history, Kind of Blue. So he's probably the most listened to jazz drummer because of that alone. He's got this wonderful clipped feel, and he's so famous for that ring click on 4. 1, 2, 3. Combine that 16th note clip with the 2 and 4. Maybe put in a feathered bass drum. You'll see why he played with so many people. And his demeanour. He was a debonair gentleman. And there you go. So there it is. So there you are. A bit of an understated show tonight. No fireworks or big double bass drums of oblivion or anything like that. I just wanted to do a bit of a tribute to a great, great drummer in Jimmy Cobb. Brilliant. And a gentleman. And when you get to 91 and you've done that amount of work, you've done all right. You've done well. So that's what's happening. And don't forget the baby socks, man. Oh, aren't they beautiful? Get yourself a set of baby socks. Go straight up the shops, baby socks. And when you're doing, Jimmy Hornets or something like that, hello, Victor, if you're watching, all that. We were going to do a Tom Waits show before the lockdown. I was going to get this. What's he building in there? Is way out west where the wind don't blow. Tony Franciosa used to date my ma. There you go. All right. Screwed the show up already. But if you're going to do Jimmy Hornets, you need brushes and you need baby socks. There you go. Take care, everyone. Thank you for... But tonight is all about dear Jimmy Cobb. And bloody hell. What a legacy, eh? Jimmy Cobb. Take care. I'm up the road. Hey!